the letter of significance, as if that Alduin's rebirth, before he went about resurrecting all of his fellow long-dead Dova and beginning to work on his grand plan to conquer the world. But theories. One argues that Alduin was more than likely much longer than that, and as ever so slowly, it's possible a few dragons that have been living in hiding all of these years had innumerable other hypothetical answers to this question. One could even make the case that maybe it was Parthenax who attacked the cabin. Perhaps our favorite Dova never did overcome that evil, but they just so happened to have gotten attacked by Alduin right before or after Helgen. However, whatever the true story here is, it's unlikely a solid answer on these events will ever be delivered. Only a few dragons may know the truth, but carries some major implications in the entire Elder Scrolls universe, and only recently came into prominence. Of course, some context is needed. So, long ago, in the year 268 of the Third Era, about 366 years prior to the events of the Elder Scrolls V, a man named Uriel Septim V was crowned Emperor of Tamriel. His reign was marked by a series of successful military conquests, and he's often regarded as the greatest emperor since the Septim Empire's own founder, Tiber Septim. However, the events surrounding Uriel V's deaths represent one of the most fascinating tales ever explored in the Elder Scrolls' rich lore. After years upon years of successful conquests all throughout Tamriel, Uriel set his sights on Akavir, a mysterious continent east of Tamriel itself. Very little is known about this land. In fact, we don't even have maps of it. We have no idea what it looks like. Akavir is said to be inhabited by snake people, ice monsters, monkey men, and so many other strange beasts. Well, in the year 290 of the Third Era, Uriel set sail to conquer it with a massive army, and was never heard from again. Well, he kind of was. I mean, a bit overly dramatic. For the first few months of his conquest, he sent reports back to Cyrodiil. But by Evening Star, the final month in an Elder Scrolls year of 290, the reports just stopped. He went dark. He was gone. People just went months without hearing from Uriel. Survivors of this failed military campaign made it back to Tamriel, where they told tales of a horrifying expedition. A surviving scout claims Uriel V was killed leading a retreat after being encircled in a city, allegedly being cut down by hordes of Tissaci, or snake men. A troubling tale. We learn about all of this in the books Disaster Ionith, Mysterious Akavir, and a handful of others. Well, one possibility that's always floated around the community was that maybe Uriel V never actually died. The sources for the claims that he did are unreliable at best. Elderly men who claim to have been Imperial scouts, who claim to have been watching a battle closely enough to the Emperor get slain. It's been a somewhat popular theory for a while. But recently, back in March of 2019, Bethesda's own Todd Howard gave an interview to Game Informer Viewing Paxton, where he said this when asked about his thoughts on fantasy. Quote, I would handle their desire to have all mysteries. Because mysteries are good for a fantasy world to have. What is beyond the ocean? What you do a game in Akavir? These are things we have thought about. Returning with his army of dragons from there to retake his throne. But it was sort of like, it's the mysterious land's mysterious. There's enough to do After that, it seems Bethesda was seriously entertaining the idea of Uriel's survival, to the point where he not only survived his alleged disaster in Akavir, but they thought his first Uriel was an army of dragons at his back to retake his throne. Now, of course, this concept never saw implementation, so Uriel's survival definitive canon is far from the proper thing to do. But really, Bethesda could have made that. And this leaves us with even more questions. How would he have found that army of dragons? Would this hypothetical reason also take place in the same time period, or was it fallible as kind of reason the current emperor after they announced coming back? There's a lot of questions to ask, and hopefully this is the narrative explored in further detail in the future. But until then, it is very much has been the focus of intense debate in the community. In the Elder Scrolls series, there are innumerable different afterlives for souls who really have done it. Worshippers of the pagan god Molag Bal will end up in some plane in the Soul Proud North died valiantly in battle to go to solve. Dragons are allegedly supposed to go to Agatha, so on and so forth. Then different afterlives. Long point confirmed several figures someone like the dragon, who is in service to, actively worshipping, and sometimes the champion of much of the kingdom. Respective afterlife. You can be the champion of both. Okay. Molag Bal, the champion of the Daedric Honor Sea, the champion of the Daedric God Boethia. You could be a proud Nord entitled to entry into Sovngarde. You are also the Dragonborn, so in theory, Akatosh should also get your soul, right? Your soul is just owed to so many various different gods. So whose should it ultimately end up with? Well, for this Bond video, I'd like to make the case that it's probably going to go to Akatosh, the god of time and father of all dragons. Dragonborn, technically, there's a couple of reasons that I and so many others in the community are adamant in technically. First, we'll take a look at Mira, champion of Hermaeus Mora, Daedric god of knowledge, who spent most of his time in Hermaeus Mora's realm, Apocrypha. At the climax of the Dragonborn DLC questline, when he's killed, his soul doesn't appear to go to Hermaeus Mora, though, nor the Dragonborn. Instead, it seems to just fly straight up into the sky, likely going to Akatosh, who, of course, with Mirak being Dragonborn, is entitled to soul. This suggests that Akatosh has some level of dominance, or dibs, over many of the lesser gods. Furthermore, within the Soul Canon, a very weird plane of oblivion where the souls and sometimes even the bodies of individuals who have been soul trapped are sent to after the dragon show, we can find an innumerable amount of dragon bones. Yet, nowhere in the entire canon is there a single dragon soul. This completely attributes to the development of the limitations. They didn't want to create a spectral dragon model out of the sky. But I think it's kind of wrong with that. Perhaps the ideal masters, the weird god things that run the soul canon, don't have enough power to keep the souls there. Perhaps Akatosh is able to get them from and I think the evidence we just went over really does support this idea. Interestingly, no one really knows what Akatosh's plane of existence really is like. Is it like a Daedric realm that's scary? Likely not, considering Akatosh is a divine rather than a Daedra. Is it filled with dragons just flying around infinite skies? Chances are that wouldn't be very fun for the Dragonborn who doesn't have wings. Whatever the case, it's relieving to imagine that no matter which Daedric gods you pledge yourself to in Skyrim, your character's soul still is safe from ending up on Earth. And with that, we are going to wrap up. Out.
Whatever
You can have
your
riddles,
reasons might be,
you
you
can have
should
plot,
plan
or
a swift
you can
exit.
have it all. The only sports that
Whatever
now
can
can
gain
be
from
booked
this
is
place,
your
you
pictures,
do more
big price
harm.
plans and taxes. Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Skyrim things.
Tailgate, do you say?
However,
Never heard of it. But if it's blood you're interested in, you should try the Healing Church. The Church controls all knowledge on blood ministration and all varieties of blood. Across the valley to the east of Yarnam lies the tower of the Healing Church, known as the Cathedral Ward. And deep within Cathedral Ward is the old Grand Cathedral.
it's so big.
The Healing Church, special home.
Stories that feel like they're more simple. Well, such curiosity breeds speculation. When I heard that, they only said there was 5
Rumor the hunt is on tonight.
Skyrim was quite possible. Running to the secret outfit direction. Only a guarantee safe from certain death. However, why did all of this show up? What possibly has this abandoned town? The general but there's no real path to back to that plane. And as I said, why not just let the Empire take care of the dragon? You're never given a solid answer regarding who was telling the truth. You're just left to question yourself and whether or not you're actually right. Well, as some players speculate, Sadia may have been the one telling the truth. You see, if you choose to side with the Red Guard warriors, you'll lead Sadia to a special location outside of Whitehall, where a man named Constantine will ambush you and use a paralyzed spell on the horse. So let ride off, promising to take it back to Hammerfell or just fly. However, if you visit Whitefoot's catacombs after this exchange, despite Constantine promising not to harm her, you'll find Sadia's buried in the earth. Why is that she's dead? Now at this point you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, this isn't that period. The warriors will obviously find and kill you. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. You see, a look inside of Skyrim's creative here shows that Sadia, like every other character in Lifeline, had a script that sends them to the catacombs should they ever be subdued to the game, killed or anything. It's entirely possible that after Sadia is handed in Montu, Randy sees him in the game, and there's no longer any real reason for her to be there, and that there's just forgotten to move the script that comes to the top of the catacombs. So essentially at this point, the question is, did Bethesda do this on purpose? Decisions. Today's number 4 here suggests that the Dragon Blood may have actually been chosen by the dragons to serve and rule with them, rather than just murder them to death as they do. You see, in Skyrim, there are 8 dragon priests masks, and through killing 8 different dragon priests, each dragon priest shares a name with its mask. This is important. In the ancient times, the dragon priests helped the dragons rule by governing in their names. You see, when the dragons were by far the most powerful beings around town, they weren't exactly however, as the time of the events in Skyrim, their souls were lost, and they're merely a bunch of over-glorified dragons. Well, after you've killed the 8 dragon priests, or at least their hearts, on a shrine. Never had an owner. And it was in fact you, the dragon boy, who was supposed to become you. You were supposed to become a dragon to serve the dragon and almost anything else. Like, so they had this nice match maker. Well, it doesn't this one. It wasn't until thousands of years later that older priest masters will finally trusted them. And ironically enough, it just happened that the first mortal capable of accomplishing this was the man that hoped on the destruction of the dragon. So, obviously, the dragon didn't really think about the whole thing. Despite the last of it, what if there was a real outcome to destruction of the dragon? What if the dragon was not a lawful system, but it actually is the god? Now, you're not the first time that you will think about it. In fact, you don't do so often. Alloys perform the first time actually if there's a time about it. The most evident kind of possible is that you are the player visits as well as yours itself. At least it's supposed to. When you visit to a farm, your itself will be noticeably absent. Someone is going to a one that should be there, but someone you can't find it anywhere because you actually already you are decided to take up a mortal avatar and that however, since you are technically part of the shore, you're allowed to share. That said, the school hasn't exactly been consistently used by the All those votes because it should be live on New Year's Day 2018. So hopefully you didn't hear any fireworks or firecrackers in the back. In case I missed it, I just didn't know. Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nick here. And the world of Fallout 4, really the entire Fallout universe, is just a fascinating and mysterious place. Nuclear conflict has been created to planet civilization we once knew, transforming it into chaotic, monster-filled wastelands, where the act of mere survival is an epic struggle. Though, when we're not fleeing from death claws or fighting off feral rules, and instead of paying attention to the environment and narratives surrounding the Commonwealth, it's hard not to realize that the game leaves us with an insane amount of years after her initial release. Fallout 4's community has developed an insane amount of possible theories and most puzzling productions. So, kick back, have Cogsworth pour you an ice-cold glass of Nuka-Cola and settle in as we dive right into 5 more spooky theories in Fallout 4. Part 2, starting off, this one is pretty big, and will obviously seem pretty likely, at least by crackpot theory standards. So, the Tower's Covenant is definitely a bit of a small, rural settlement whose residents enjoy a luxurious, pre-war suburban lifestyle and culture. The village juxtaposes the horrible wasteland surrounding the city. The people have large two-story homes, wear pre-war clothes, have barbecues, drink everything. Before the bombs fell, all of this stuff was the norm. But in this world, it just makes no sense. It seems really odd. So eventually, the secret. But it doesn't really explain their strange obsession with emulating a pre-war lifestyle. Evidently, the townsfolk are absolutely paranoid about the Institute and fear synthetic infiltration. Nearby, they've created a small base in the ruins of a sewer, where they've been torturing and experimenting on captured citizens. This is all the focus of the side quest, where the sole survivor is sent to infiltrate said compound, and you'll be forced to decide whether to save the city's child or let her be murdered to death by Covenant-aligned scientists. So a neat little storyline, but what's the deal with this town's pre-war character itself? The side quest doesn't really touch on this. Well, there's one explanation I think you guys might really like. The citizens of Covenant have lineage that traces back to Vault 101, the player vault from Fallout 3. This is a pretty bold claim, so let's break down the evidence. For one, before being allowed into Covenant, you'll have to pass something called the State Test, an oral exam administered to you by a man guarding the gate. It's meant to try and root out any potential sins and intruders. Don't worry, no matter how you respond, you'll be okay. Later on, using human error, we find out that in the people of Covenant's secret underground base, they've been administering the same test to many of their city captains. The thing about this test, though, as anyone who has ever played Fallout 3 will immediately recognize, it's actually a verbatim, word-for-word copy of the GOAT exam that all Vault 101 residents were expected to take, which determined their profession in the Vault at a rather young age. For most people, myself included, it's fairly easy to just write this off as a funny Easter egg by Bethesda. But things get a lot weirder. We're going that secret compound The guard there, the set of armor, that was big. And it's supposed to be under the red light. They did a full text logo to the oh my god. And all throughout the hidden bits, Vault-Tec posters containing GOAT questions can be seen. Okay, so now I think it should be blatantly apparent that the settlement of Covenant has some weird connections to the Vault-Tec Corporation. But why do some people think these people are associated with Vault-101 specifically? Other Vaults likely have a similar. And surely they all had armor and whatnot, so why 101? Well, one of those posters find inside the secret base with a ghost weapon. Well, congratulations, you've just made one of the Vault 101 baseball pieces. Listen to this. Vault 101. These people had a constant. This is it's been argued that maybe this poster in particular was a bit of an accident by Bethesda. Maybe they didn't really need to put this exact one in the game. They were just reusing some Fallout 3 assets and this was fine. But that doesn't seem to be the case. While yes, these posters all similar images from Fallout 3's Joey Station line, the posters themselves are totally unique to this part of Fallout 4. Someone at Bethesda purposely typed out the question, you made one of the Vault 101 baseball teams. This was no error. If it was infringing. Having origins relating to a Vault would explain Covenant's insistence. I mean, it's a suburban sport. That's what Vault dwellers have always imagined life should be. It would explain their equipment, how they command so many free-for resources and luxury items. This makes a lot more sense than it could be that all these events of Bethesda's last one of them then found themselves in the Covenant. Or maybe they were I don't compare from another whatever the original mindset of the Covenant are, Vault-Tec definitely seems to have a lot to do with it. Our next theory is that the children of Adam's God is real, but not in the way that they let me explain. The Children of Adam represent one of the weirdest factions in the wasteland. A strange, sometimes violent force that worships the power of nuclear arms, which is the horrifying world they created, and a whole lot less horrifying than everyone else. They're a fascinating group of fellows. It's really easy to write them off as totally nuts. But in Fallout 4, they consistently demonstrate a really weird power no normal human beings should have. Weird immunity to radiation. Throughout the whole game, notably at their settlements in the glowing sea and their Far Harbor headquarters, which is in a radiated settlement city, you constantly find Adam's worshippers living out their lives in areas that should be totally uninhabitable due to radiation levels. Seriously, they have highly sophisticated patterns that most normal human beings would be dead in after spending a few days. I'm sure it does seem like a couple of them do lose their hair, but still, it should be much worse. Indeed, the Children of Adam's strange ability to combat this rat exposure is one of the Fallout universe's bigger unsolved mysteries. Then, in the Far Harbor Let's say 5 of the factors will play to what? Will we chase down a ghost worshipped by the Children of Adam, known as the Frog just for one of Adam's problems. So,
Stay assholes.
These people have some shady characteristics. And some users on Reddit believe they may be getting some supernatural help. Though, that's not the thing. You see, the entire Children of Adam's religion predicates itself on this belief that there's a monotheistic being named Adam that expresses itself.
Sorry, Pop.
And the Fallout universe pretty much establishes that that's not really true. The events of the Great War had little to do with religion and more to do with some very irresponsible people in some various governments. Nuclear bombs are a man-made device, a weapon of a past society, not a gift from a god. But what if the Children of Adam are still getting some supernatural? Strongest god was basically known as Adam, spelled A-D-U-S. Egyptians and Helios believed him to be the first god, the creator of the world as we know it, and most other gods, having himself emerged from what the Egyptians called the primordial waters of chaos, to build everything. You can already see some real parallels between this guy and the COA's god. Both emerged from chaos to create. Both are pretty much called the same thing, and they're each the principal gods of their respective religions. Some have put two and two together and concluded that perhaps the Children of Adam are sort of accidentally earning this Egyptian god's favor, and in exchange, getting some help. Now, it's to write such an idea that there really is some sort of god in this universe. Often not. But keep in mind, much of what we consider normal and magical is established facts in the Fallout franchise. Ghosts that haunt us, aliens that abduct us, weird Cthulhu monsters that scare us, people who exist, where all these things definitely exist. Maybe it is possible that the Children have a patron from far away. Ow!
Plastics recovered from our oceans is a luxury one. For high quality and a cleaner.
Introduced into the Fallout universe by Fallout 4 was cats. Yet, until this installment, the adorable furry felines had never made an appearance in the franchise. Now, they're everywhere. In settlements, the wild, and you can even find one on the Pridwin and in Vault 81. The thing here is, though, upon by Bethesda, or hey, maybe Mr. House was just wrong. A few especially imaginative survivors in the wasteland, and especially that will perfectly explain the phenomenon of this kitty comeback, a cat cult. Some have suggested that perhaps prior to the war, Voltec built one of their over 100 homes with cats. Yet, a more populated not by men, but by these cuddly domesticated mammals. And only relatively recently, these dead homes opened back up, bringing kitty cats to America's Northeast. There are a few variations on this half-serious proposal. Some like to imagine that maybe this hypothetical home would have had a staff of robotic servants delivering the kitties and constantly supplying food and water. Others have really stretched it and proposed that perhaps beneath their fur, Voltec
You know my apples? What is fucking right side my apples?
water them as much. Whatever the case, well, pretty wild, not unlike another. It's true, it was both technology and explain the rest was many considered to one hole in a fairly poor premise, man. I do have to mention, though, that Fallout 76 greatly lowered the chances of this execution as that game also included cats in its environment, and takes place just 25 years after further solidifying the culture. The problem really makes them go into the first that Mr. House was just the next stop. Nonetheless, a kitty bolt existing somewhere out there in the world is still a pretty funny thing to think about. Come on, Bethesda, no human energy, cats, J76. Poor Spot. Billy the Cool-Eyed Kid has been at the center of a lot of internal controversy within the Fallout community. He's the center of the quest, Kid at a Bridge. Allegedly, his backstory goes a little something like this. Long ago, probably about when the Great War was kicking off, Billy heard some rumbling and took cover in a bridge. The mechanism locked though, and he found himself trapped inside of it for a really long time. Until you showed up to get him out. Now, he'll ask that you help him find his parents, who just so happen to be still alive as ghouls, just a ways south of Quincy. It seems obvious that what Bethesda's trying to imply here is that Billy was stuck in that bridge for
There you are, fucking bastard. Come here.
Who will find just after the bomb started?
Give me my 3,000 apples back.
Living that already existed stuck in a bridge for 200 years.
Shit, I missed that.
As well as wars insisted on the question of whether or not wolves actually
Why? Every time.
alpha. But one of the evidence points to the fact that, yes, they do need to and therefore willing to start with death only a few days after taking cover in the jungle, regardless of what radiation was involved. In fairness, it is established that ghouls definitely don't need to be as often as normal humans do, so theoretically he could have survived a bit longer if the ghoul was quickly, but certainly not 2 centuries. Furthermore, when we finally do get him back to his parents, the reaction is incredibly underwhelming. After supposedly 200 years away from their child, having previously assumed he was dead, when they finally do see it, their entire response is basically, oh wow, baby, we're glad you're on now, let's all get you. Now go to your room. It's honestly really that. Well, one somewhat out-of-the-box theory seems to perfectly explain this question's logical and logical gap. Here we go. Well, we know for a fact that Billy did take cover from some explosion in a bridge and was trapped in there for quite some time. No one in the game actually confirms it was the bridge or Billy's detective stuff. And in fact, rather than just ignore the parents, never said exactly how long they've been apart. Basically, the top span has really long. Some believe that maybe Billy wasn't hiding in the bridge to avoid the falling nuclear bomb some 200 years ago, but instead a much more recent concept. Only a couple of months prior to the events of Fallout 4, a major time an mercenary organization known as the Gunners, we'll talk about them more later, broke out notably where Billy this engagement was greatly advanced and incredibly chaotic, and led to the virtual collapse of the ministry. And quite a few of this in near shambles of survival. It may be possible that during this battle, an already enemy sought shelter in a bridge that was just a few meters away from the sun. This would not only explain why he didn't starve to death, schools can likely go a couple of months without food and water, but also why his parents weren't as surprised as you'd expect them. All straight up admit, this is probably the wackiest proposal of this video, but hey, a wacky explanation is better than an explanation that is impossible. So, yeah, finally, last on our list, the Gunners are a mysterious family. One reason that command a sizable amount of soldiers and the illusion of that combines opportunities for artisans of greatness with conditions, organization, and an effective and more military goal. They occupy various locations throughout the continent and routinely ambush or direct any settlements you might command. Yet their origins are left completely unexplained by the residents. They took far well, many believe their origins may exist. One brother of both 75. Both 75 over 50. So it's marketed as a book specifically for children, so America could preserve it. But secretly, its real intentions were a lot more sinister. Yes, Mobile was primarily filled with kids. Those children were being bred as military super soldiers. The staff practiced horrifying eugenics, killing any child they didn't believe was in the utmost perfect physical condition. For a while, Voltec staff thought this was working great, but eventually the kids caught on to what was happening. They began to realize that they were being used basically as cannon fodder, treated as slaves, and really wanted out of the whole thing. Lucky them, they were all trained super soldiers, and easily revolted, butchering most of the staff, and using some explosives to blow the door off of the place itself, before running off into the Commonwealth. Many players believe that some of these escaped children might have went on to found the Gunners. It would provide an intelligible reason behind their huge and strict military hierarchy, justify why they don't seem to have any real goals beyond enriching themselves, and, notably, explain their presence in Vault 75. Because looking at Vault 75, it's occupied by the Gunners. They control this unit. You can't assume that, hey, maybe they're here just because it's a vault that's got big technological significance. Or maybe it's a little of that, and maybe it's partially because this is where they all came from. Or at least where some of their founders came from. That revolt didn't happen yesterday. It seems to have happened around 170 months. The outlook for overpriced pizza has never been better. So it's gonna stop we're little seasons to fight our new quattro digging this today!
Come here, fatso. Ow, ow, stop. Stop. There you go. No, I don't want to die by you.
I know. Today we've got another one of those spooky videos playing. Anyway, how's it going, guys? It's Nick here. And the world of Fallout 4, despite taking place on our very own. Even exotic plates at times. Atomic fire, a broken evolutionary process, corrupt factions, and over 200 years for it all to come together have quite literally changed everything. And this irradiated new world often leaves us with some nuclear-sized questions that the game doesn't answer. The Fallout franchise seems to revel in leaving players scratching their heads in curiosity at a number of unexplained events and phenomena. From grand, world-changing themes like the existence of aliens, to tinier, less significant inquiries like how a certain food is prepared, it seems like there's always another enigma with a couple of layers. And today, I'd like to analyze a few more. Just sit back, crack open a nice little bottle of mythical victory, and settle it. And we take a look at 5 more unsettling mysteries in Fallout 4. Part 5 is Night. Starting off, today's video begins at the Boston Public Library. Now, this is already one of my favorite locations in the game. When we first arrived here, the building will still be occupied by a small legion of feeble robots that will currently be battling against an invading army of super mutants. It's a pretty weird yet exciting affair. However, the mystery that I want to hone in on has little to do with what's going on inside the library itself. Instead, we're interested in what's on top of it. You see, if the player uses a jetpack power armor modification, it's possible to reach the building's roof. And here, you'll find the body of a dead Brotherhood of Steel initiate. In his inventory will be missiles, a missile launcher, and some other level Brotherhood gear. At first, this corpse may not seem all that. the dude fell out of a vertibird or climbed up here to do some recon and just had a heart attack or something. But the thing is, this dude's body will be up here from the start of the game. Well, before the Brotherhood actually in force for the Common. Prior to the arrival of the Bridwin at the end of the game, the Brotherhood should have next to no presence at all in Boston. So, how did one of their agents end up dead on some roof in the area before then? Well, we do know from a few Brotherhood-associated quests that in the years before coming to Massachusetts with the Brickwin and whatnot, the faction did send in 2 recon parties to scout the area, a couple years apart. And neither of those expeditions ended very well. The first recon team, sent in around 7 years prior to the just totally disappeared and went completely MIA a few days into their journey. Never to be returned. And that team suffered a similar fate, pretty much going dark a few days after arriving too. So it's possible that this dead initiate could have some connection to one of those previous expeditions, at least in theory. The trouble is, it's pretty unlikely that the Brotherhood would have sent in fresh initiates with those early recon squads. Those were big, dangerous missions that required nothing less than the best power armor-equipped troops. And an initiate is ready without no place to study endeavor. So the idea that this guy could have participated in either of those operations is shaky at best. And again, those were years ago. Well, okay, I am looking out a certain yes. How it is is present in Fallout 4 from the beginning of the game, and so it's hypothetically possible this dead initiate could have belonged to Paladin Dance's recon squad, but that too is also highly unlikely. Primarily because Dance confirms there were only 7 members in that group, and they were all knights, save for a single scribe. So that notion is rather unworkable. At the end of the day, however this poor guy found his way to the top of Boston's public library is a question that's answer likely died with him. Next on our list, who was Mr. Carter, and how did he get out of the Institute? Alright, so this history requires a bit of context. The people of Diamond City are, to put it mildly, absolutely paranoid regarding the idea of Sith infiltration. They think of the Institute as a boogeyman, and they're constantly accusing their fellow Wastelanders of being synthetic plants. A number of events have led to Diamond City's population becoming so terrified of these metallic men, but undeniably the most significant thing was that they are now known as the Broken Masses. On a broad basis of around prior to expensive before the Institute was organization, Diamond City was changed forever. When a man named Mr. Carter entered the town and it said that he's quite a charismatic fellow. He spoke of coming from an exotic place out west, and as the night aged, he quickly found himself at the center of a large crowd, all eager to share laughs and stories with this strange foreign man. However, a few hours into the festivities, all of a sudden, Mr. Carter stopped smiling and laughing with the group. His cheeks started twitching, and he pulled out a revolver and opened fire on the crowd around him. Carter would go on to kill 4 residents before being taken out himself by Diamond City security, and an autopsy would reveal that he was not a human being at all, but instead a Sith, designed by the Institute. This event would be the catalyst for the paranoia Diamond City feels towards androids to this day, and people have all sorts of theories. Some citizens believe that Mr. Carter was part of the combat test. Others allege that he was a spy which malfunctioned. There's even a belief that the railroad had something to do with it. Purchase now.
you? And an outsider. What a mess you've been caught up in. And tonight,
But
of
what
all
about you?
nights, here, to welcome the new hunter. Prepare yourself for the worst. There are no humans left. They're all flesh-hungry beasts now. Still lingering about. What's wrong? A hunter unnerved by a few beasts. No matter. Without fear in our hearts.
To themselves.
From the
Surely
beasts
they know what actually happened, right? Well, this is where things get even stranger. They actually seem pretty clueless too. The faction barely references the incident, but when they do, they claim that Mr. Carter was an early Generation 3 Sim prototype that was not approved for field testing or placement. I.e., it wasn't even supposed to be outside of the structure itself.
That scared the shit out of me, dude.
And certainly wasn't actually a legal path. Until Rock just that everyone in the organization was pretty upset about it. And the event left to further on the Ben Director's legacy. But at the end of the day, the Institute seems just as baffled as everyone else. How did Mr. Carter somehow find himself outside the wasteland when he wasn't approved for such exposure? Why did he choose to mingle with the crowd in Darkness City? I mean, if he was an escapee, surely he would have just ran as far away as possible from the Commonwealth, right? And lastly, what was the cause of his malfunction? These are all huge questions that we'll likely never see answered, but it's a mystery that changed the Commonwealth forever. Coming in at number 3, we head on over to New World to analyze a rather small mystery that more than likely has a pretty disturbing explanation. Bloodborne campus is the world that serves as the headquarters for the Pact, an especially barbaric and tribal gang of raiders known for their weird cannibal-like hierarchy. Well, only at the Bradford Amphitheater, specifically in its backstage area, we can find 2 unique consumable items: mystery jerky and mystery cake. We can find these 2 types both on tables as well as in food bowls for the Pact's various dogs and cats, implying that both Pact members themselves and their pets fancy this stuff. But beyond your question to ask yourself, what exactly is this mystery jerky and bacon made out of? Well, this question seems to have a fairly simple and, as mentioned, disturbing truth behind it. Because if the player has the cannibal or active, consuming either of these mystery meats will cause them to give you additional HP. Yeah, they have bumps pegged to your cannibalism. It's people that the Pact turned into bacon and jerky. Frankly, this is kind of surprising. We know these raiders aren't the most civilized, but the fact that they literally eat human beings is a bit of a big deal. That the only association doesn't seem to come further.
Right, asshole.
Yeah, I guess it's best to try and remain grateful. Once you find yourself in the journey, or was thought, how big is the railroad in the capital wasteland? This question may seem a bit odd at first, so let me explain. Within the railroad's Old North Church headquarters, we can find a desk with a radio on top of it, and a single railroad agent sitting there transcribing various notes. When you walk up to this radio to listen to it, though, it won't be playing music. Instead, it will be emitting a weird series of beats. These beats are in fact Morse code. Now, while I have absolutely zero idea how to translate Morse code, thankfully the internet has no choice to and when this transmission is translated from Morse code into English, it reads as follows. Quote, Dead Drop Disco needs a pickup. Urgent. Capital wasteland available for delivery. Package lost raiders, repeat raiders, dents, salvage team, and baseball tango aids. Okay, so this strange salad of words may not have made the most sense, but it's clear the railroad is receiving an urgent transmission that, at least in some capacity, concerns operations in the capital wasteland. I'm unsure if they're attempting to extract something from the Washington, D.C. area, or deliver something to it. And it also seems as though their operation is being compromised by raiders. But nonetheless, the point still stands. They're doing stuff in D.C. In fact, by itself, there is some substantial implications on the Fallout universe's canon. Because it means that even if we do quote-unquote destroy the railroad in Fallout 4 and the whole defenses, we won't have taken care of everything. There will still probably need to be the lives of this, of course, provides Bethesda with a convenient excuse to bring them back in a future title without really infringing on anybody's gameplay experience, as they won't be interrupting any canon. But what I'm really interested in is just how significant are the railroad's operations all the way over there. We know that the railroad was active in DC at least 10 years prior to the events of Fallout 4. As in Fallout 3, which took place 10 years ago, we could interact with them slightly during the side quest of Replicated Man, which centered around a man named Harvey who was an android trying to evade Institute persecution. We could help the Institute capture Harkin, or we could side with the girl named Victoria Watts, who claims to belong to a faction known as the Railroad that was dedicated to saving Sims and slaves. Now, all the way back in Fallout 3, the Railroad's lore clearly wasn't as well fleshed out as it is today, and their operation didn't seem all that sophisticated. So my question is, how has it grown? Do they have multiple bases, multiple agents? What exactly are they doing over there now since all this time has passed? It's worth pointing out that during the Replicated Man quest, the Institute member we would interact with the most was a man named Dr. Zimmer.
Look up, boys. Look on me. Let me get him. Ow.
Now you've been an enemy.
In Fallout 4's
They're used to me now.
I know that smell. Are you a hunter? Please
Institute SRB, we can find a terminal that suggests Dr. Zimmer is still alive and well, doing missions far away from the Commonwealth. Is it possible that he's still in DC, perhaps battling against the railroad? I, and frankly everyone within the community, am pretty unsure. But nonetheless, it's quite exciting to speculate. And finally, last on the list, what the heck is in Deezer's lemonade? Alright, so this is a much less serious mystery than most of what this video has been focused on, but it all starts at the town of Covenant. Covenant is a strange settlement in the Commonwealth's northeastern region. It's got arguably Covenant's most notable citizen is its resident Mr. Handybot, Deezer, who does virtually nothing at all but sell, and apparently make, a certain beverage that he calls his lemonade. The problem is that, as many companions may note when passing by, and that even Caesar seems to admit, lemons are extinct by the time Fallout 4 takes place. They literally don't exist anymore. So, what's Caesar's drink made out of? Well, he won't say. If you bring a follower with you when purchasing some, they may ask Caesar what it is, and he'll claim it's made from, quote, 4 of the finest ingredients, but intentionally not say what those ingredients are. Followers may comment on the lemonade tasting pretty horrible, so it's safe to assume that it's not very sweet or anything like genuine lemonade at all. But again, we're clueless. Some have floated the idea that maybe it's just human waste, which looks like lemonade. But I find that rather unlikely, seeing as it does really restore HP when consumed, and many of Covenant's own residents do seem to respond to this time. So it's probably at least edible. The whole ordeal of being accosted to buy lemonade from this weird British robot in this weird town initially struck me as pretty freaky, if I'm being honest. I remember during my first playthrough, and I think this will resonate with a lot of people, thinking that the lemonade would cause me to black out or something after I drank it, and my character would awake in some strange prison. But that's not the case. It doesn't seem to do anything at all that's harmful. At the end of the day, though, whatever's in this strange liquid, only Deezer knows. And Deezer, what we sell. And with that, we are going to wrap up.
And I
Far
will
more
transfer
unexplained
to
and
your
unsettling
strength.
mysteries in Fallout 4.
You will have peace, and I will be here for you to embolden your sickly spirit.
Hey, how's it going, y'all?
Very well. Let the echoes become your strength. Let me stand close. Now shut your eyes.
I am going to get my arcane up for sure. I'll leave it at 12 for now. Strength up.